Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are when you're watching this. Today we're going to look at cattails. Cattails are a plant that most people are familiar with, especially if you go wandering around creeks and wet places. And today we'll look at two uses for this plant. It has other uses, but we'll talk about those at another time when the plants are actively growing. You'll recognise cattails by these flower stalks. When they're growing, the male flower is up here, but because it's winter they've fallen off, and this is the female flower. Most people will recognise those if they've spent enough time wandering, as I said, along wet places. The plants have died down now for the winter. They spent the summer and early autumn collecting energy in the form of starch, which they've put down into their rhizomes, their thick roots. And that's one of the uses we'll be looking at today. So let's go and dig up a rhizome. We can take it back to the kitchen and I can show you how a couple of ways to prepare it. Okay, in a survival situation you would be looking at digging up cattail rhizomes with a pointy hard stick, but today for ease I'll be using a spade. So of course most of these plants are in the swamp behind me, but I'm not going into the water and mud to do this, so we'll see what we can do with these in the harder soil at the front here. I don't want to pull too hard on these stems, otherwise because they're dead they'll just come off. Right here, here's a good rhizome. As you can see, this is the starchy root that's got all the energy in it, the starch that we can eat, but we can't eat it like this. We have to prepare it first to get the starch out of it. If you tried to chew on it like this, it's just all fibre and it's just really hard to use. So we'll just cut that off. Use the spade. See how fibrous it is? Oops, can you see how fibrous it is? And this is a new shoot for next spring. Now I'll try and get one more, because there's two main ways of preparing these to eat, so I will try and get two rhizomes to show you both ways. There's another small one. They're really tough at this time of year. Anyway, we'll work on that. Hi, we're looking at cattails again today, and this use is for in a survival situation. If you're lost or injured, maybe a car's broken down, in winter it's cold and no one's going to come and find you and you need to stay a bit warmer overnight, here's a good way to use cattails to keep a little bit warmer. Only a few degrees can be the difference between being cold and getting hypothermia. So we're going to use these cattail flowers, these female flowers, and we're going to break them up, and you can see they turn into fluff. One flower can produce a lot of fluff. The good thing about this fluff is it's water repellent. It doesn't get wet even if you dunk it in water, which means the use we're putting it today, if it rains on you, it's still going to keep its insulation properties. So one of the things you can use it for is insulation, as I'm about to show. And it's really good for that. So what you would do is, I've got a jacket on today, or even if you've just got a t-shirt, is use this fluff to stuff your clothes, including your pants, with fluff. So with your coat, you would try and undo some of the lining at the top. You see, it's not well sewn together. There's an inner and an outer lining, and this is really not very good insulation. And you would just spend your time just taking all this fluff off and just stuffing it into your jacket, right down the arms, until you look like a lumpy Michelin man. Remember, if somebody's coming to find you, to save you, they're not going to care that you look a bit silly. They just don't want to be looking for a corpse. This actually works very well, even if it is a bit messy, but it doesn't take long to do and it's not difficult. Just keep stuffing it in there until you've got as much as you can stuffed in there. If you've got a car with you that's broken down and seat covers, you can also stuff your seat covers with it and use it to cover yourself while you're sleeping on the back seat. Okay, so now I've half filled my coat with fluff, and it's looking a bit more like I'm covered with a quilt. Of course, if you were really stuck out here, you would spend more time filling the whole thing up, but there's only so much time I've got, and I'm covered in fluff. But anyway, as far as when it comes to your pants, the leaves at this time of the year, they're damp and they're soft, they're not brittle, so you can use the leaves to plait together and make a cord to tie around the base of your pants so that the fluff doesn't just all fall out, and fill your pants as well. And as I said, because the fluff is water repellent, you can hunker down somewhere and it doesn't matter so much if it rains, it's still going to keep its ability to keep you warm. Okay, well, I hope that's been instructive, and I'll see you back at the kitchen where we'll prepare our rhizomes. Should also have mentioned that if you have a hood on your jacket, close it tight about your head and stuff that with fluff as well. It's really important to keep your head warm, and it makes a huge difference to your comfort. Okay, we're back in my garden today. We're going to process cattail rhizomes for food, to separate the starch from all the fibre inside. There's two main ways to do this. The first way is to lay your rhizomes next to your campfire without them getting burnt. It takes a long time, but they have to completely dry out, so all night, maybe some of the next day before they're completely dry. I've done this a couple of times. You have to keep turning them and you have to really be careful that they don't burn. When they're completely dry, you just scrape the outside of the rhizomes, the skin, and then you twist them. And the starch inside is like flour. It just falls out from between the fibres. But since I don't have the time or energy to do that today, I'm going to do another way, which is not quite as efficient. You don't get quite as much of the starch out, but it's easier. And it involves, if you were in the bush, you would use a couple of stones, a flat stone and one to fit in your hand to bash the rhizomes so that you're crushing them and separating the starch. But today in my garden I'm just going to use a piece of wood and an old hammer. And you have nice white starch in the bottom. There's a bit of crap in there too. If you were in an emergency you wouldn't even bother with that, but you can clean that off by just adding more water and tipping it out like this. If you're careful you can get nearly all the water out, and then you can just leave it by the fire and allow the water to evaporate and you'll just have starch left. You can eat that or add it to other foods as you like. So this is the amount of starch from just 2 small rhizomes. You can see how much you would probably get if you spent an hour or two digging rhizomes.